The video of 3 guys who supposedly captured a Bigfoot is going viral. Check it out.
A video is going viral on the internet in which 3 brothers filmed and captured a supposed Bigfoot.
Keep him down. Pull, pull. He's breaking loose. Dig in your heels. Finally, guys, we captured a Bigfoot. Take a look.
My name is Caleb, and I am the only one of the 3 of us who still talks about that night. My brothers don't. Tyler changed the subject every time anyone got close to it, right up until the day he died. And Marcus, my oldest brother, he just stopped talking about a lot of things. So it falls to me. Somebody has to say what happened up there, even if nobody believes a single word of it. I don't blame you if you don't. I wouldn't have believed it either, back before. We grew up in a small town in the mountains of Washington State, the kind of place where the trees go up forever and the roads run out before. The wild does. Our daddy was a logger and his daddy before him. And from the time we could walk, the 3 of us were out in those woods. We knew them, or at least we thought we did. We knew where the deer trails ran and where the trout sat in the cold creeks and which ridges caught the morning sun. We thought knowing a place like that meant the place couldn't surprise you. That was our first mistake, thinking the woods owed us anything just because we'd grown up in them. I was 26 that fall. Tyler was 29 and Marcus was 31. We weren't kids anymore, but when the 3 of us got together, it was like we never grew up at all. We'd been planning this hunting trip for the better part of a year. Marcus had found a stretch of old-growth forest way up past the last logging road, country so far back that hardly anybody had a reason to gee. Oh, there. He'd been talking to an old-timer at the feed store who swore the elk back in there were the size of horses. So we packed up Marcus's truck with enough gear for a week, and we drove until the road turned to gravel, and then we drove until the gravel turned to dirt, and then we got out, and we walked. It took us most of a day to hike in. We followed a creek up through a canyon, climbing the whole way until the canyon opened up into a kind of bowl-shaped valley with a flat grisha in meadow in the middle and steep walls of dark timber all around it. There was a little cabin at the edge of the meadow, an old hunting shack somebody had built decades ago and abandoned. The roof had a few holes in it, and the door hung crooked on its hinges, but it had 4 walls and a wood stove, and after a full day of hiking, it looked like a palace to us. We dropped our packs and decided to make it our base camp. I remember that first evening being just about perfect. We got a fire going in the stove and cooked up some elk sausage Marcus had brought, and we sat outside in the last light, watching the meadow turn gold and then gray. The valley was so quiet it almost rang in your ears. No planes overhead, no engines, nothing. Just the creek going by and the wind moving high up in the tops of the trees. Tyler said it was the most peaceful place he'd ever been, and he was right. It was. For about one more day, it was. The first strange thing happened the next morning, and at the time, we didn't even think much of it. We'd hung our food bag from a high branch the way you're supposed to in bear country, 20 feet off the ground and well away from the cabin. When we woke up, the rope had been pulled down and the bag was gone. Now, a bear will do that. A bear will get into your food if it can reach it. But the thing was, the branch was too high for a bear to reach, and bears don't untie knots. The rope hadn't been chewed or broken. It had been worked loose the way a person would do it, and then the whole thing had been lowered down gentle and carried off. We found the bag 100 yards into the trees, and it had been opened, not torn. The cans were stacked up in a little pile. Stacked, like somebody had sorted through what we had. Marcus laughed it off. He said it was probably a couple of teenagers messing with us, or some hermit living back in the hills who wanted to give us a scare. Tyler didn't laugh. Tyler was the careful one of us, always had been, and I could see him looking at those stacked cans for a long time without saying anything. But we cleaned up the mess, hung what food we had left even higher, and went on with our day. We hunted the ridges all afternoon and saw plenty of elk sign, but no elk. And we came back to the cabin tired and hungry and put the whole thing out of our minds. The second night is when it really started. I woke up sometime past midnight to the sound of something walking around the cabin. Not a deer. Deer step light and quick. This was heavy and slow, and it went on 2 feet. I lay there in my sleeping bag listening to it, telling myself it was just one of my brothers gone out to relieve himself, until I heard Mar. Q's snoring on one side of me and felt Tyler shift in his sleep on the other. All 3 of us were inside, and something big was walking circles around the cabin in the dark. I woke Tyler up first, a hand over his mouth so he wouldn't make noise. Then Marcus. We all 3 lay there listening. The footsteps would go quiet for a while and then start up again, and every now and then we'd hear a low sound, almost too low to hear. More of a feeling in your chest than a sound in your ears. Marcus reached over real slow and got his rifle, and he chambered around, and the second that bolt clicked, the footsteps outside stopped dead. Just stopped. The whole valley went silent. It was the kind of silence that listens back at you. We sat up the rest of the night with the lamp lit and the guns across our laps, and nothing came, but nothing left either. We could feel it out there in the dark, waiting, the way you can feel somebody standing behind you. When the sun finally came up, we went out and looked, and that's when we found the first track. It was pressed into the soft mud at the edge of the creek, clear as anything. A footprint. But it was the size of a snow shovel, near to 17 inches long, with 5 toes spread wide and a deep heel. No claws. No bear ever made that print, and no man either, not unless that man was 9 feet tall. Tyler put his own boot down next to it for size, and his boot looked like a child's shoe beside it. We didn't any of us say the word out loud. You don't say it, but we were all 3 thinking it. Now I want to be honest with you about what we should have done. We should have packed up right then and walked out. We had a clear morning. We knew the way, and every cell in our bodies was telling us to go. But we didn't. And I've thought about why for a long time, and I think the truth is that some part of each of us didn't want to be the one to say we were cared. We were grown men, hunters, mountain people. We'd have rather died than admit some story we'd laughed about our whole lives had us shaking in a cabin. And there was something else too, something I'm less proud of. There was a curiosity, a wanting to know. Marcus said it first, sitting there looking at that track. He said, what if we could prove it? What if we could be the ones who finally proved it was real? That was the idea that killed us, or near enough. We spent that whole day not hunting elk anymore, but hunting it. We followed the tracks where we could find them, and they led us all over that valley, up the timbered slopes, and down along the creek, and a chain, round the meadow. Whatever it was, it had been everywhere. It had been watching us the whole time. We found a spot up on the north slope where the ground was packed down flat under a big leaning cedar, like something had been bedding down. There, and from that spot, you could see the whole meadow and the cabin clear as day. It had a window into our camp. It had been sitting up there watching us cook our food and lay out our gear and go to sleep for 2 nights, maybe longer. Marcus had this plan. He'd done some trapping when he was younger, and he'd brought along a couple of heavy steel cable snares, the kind you use for big game. His idea was that the thing kept coming for our food, so we'd use the food against it. We rigged up a trap near the food bag, a snare anchored to the base of a thick tree, set to close on a leg if something came pulling at the bag. Tyler thought it was a terrible idea. He said anything strong enough to make that track was strong enough to tear our heads off, and the last thing we wanted was to make it mad. But Marcus had that look he got, the older brother look that meant the discussion was over, and I went along with it because I always went along with Marcus. That was the kind of brothers we were. Marcus decided, and Tyler worried, and I went along. We baited the trap with the last of our food, and we waited in the cabin with the lights off. The third night, it came around 2 in the morning. We heard the footsteps again, slow and heavy, coming down off the north slope and into the meadow. We heard it cross the open ground. We heard it stop near the food bag. And then we heard the snare go off, the steel cable snapping tight with a sound like a whip crack. And then we heard a scream. I have heard a lot of things in those woods. I've heard cougars scream, and that's a sound that'll freeze your blood. I've heard elk bugle and bears moan and owls make sounds you wouldn't believe came out of a bird. But I have never, before or since, heard anything like what came out of that valley when our trap closed on its leg. It wasn't an animal sound. That's the thing I can't get past, even now. It had pain in it, sure, but it had something else, something that sounded almost like words, like a person crying out in a language you don't. Tino. It went on, and it filled up that whole valley, and it bounced off the timber walls so you couldn't tell which direction it was coming. Gee, and we sat in that dark cabin with our hands over our ears, and I think all three of us were crying. I know I was, because it didn't sound like we'd caught a monster. It sounded like we'd hurt something that could feel it. We didn't go out until dawn. None of us could. We just sat there listening to it fight the cable, the tree groaning and the cable singing tight, and that voice rising and falling until in awfully near morning it went quiet. When the gray light came up, we made ourselves go out, all three together, guns up, and we crossed that wet meadow toward the trap. It was sitting on the ground with its back against the tree, and the cable was around its left ankle, and it watched us come. I don't have good words for what it looked like. I've had years to think of them, and I still don't. It was big, bigger than any of us by a couple of feet even sitting down, and it was covered in dark reddish-brown hair, matted and wet from the night. But it was the face that stopped me cold. It wasn't an animal face. The eyes were set forward like ours, deep brown, and they were full of something I can only call understanding. When it looked at me, it knew me. It knew exactly what I was and what I'd done. It had a face that was somewhere between a man and an ape, but more than both. And right then, sitting in the mud with its ankle torn up and bleeding, it looked at the three of us with those eyes, and it wasn't rage I saw in them. It was sorrow, like it was disappointed in us, like it had expected better. We stood there a long time, none of us able to move or speak. Then Tyler, real quiet, said, "We have to let it go." And Marcus said, "We can't. Look at it. This changes everything. This is proof." And while they argued, the thing just sat there watching us, breathing slow, its big chest rising and falling, not fighting anymore, just waiting to see what we'd decide. And I'll tell you, the longer I looked at it, the more I felt like a criminal, like we'd done something we had no right to do. Like we'd reached up and grabbed something that was never ours to touch. We didn't decide anything that morning, and that was its own kind of deciding. Marcus wouldn't let it go, and Tyler wouldn't let Marcus shoot it. So we did the worst possible thing, which was nothing. We left it there in the snare and went back to the cabin to figure out what to do. Marcus wanted to hike out and get a camera, get people, make it real. Tyler wanted to cut it loose before we got somebody killed. And I sat in the middle the way I always did, useless. That's when we noticed it had gotten dark again. Not nighttime dark. It was still the middle of the morning. But the light had gone strange and thick, like a storm coming, except there were no clouds. And the woods, which had been loud with birds at dawn, had gone completely silent. Dead silent. And then we heard it. Footsteps. But not one set this time, many. They came down off every slope at once, out of the timber, on all sides of the valley, slow and heavy and certain. We ran to the cabin window and looked out, and we could see them moving in the trees, dark shapes, more than we could count, coming down toward the meadow from every direction. They had come for the one we caught. I don't know how they knew. Maybe they heard it screaming in the night, the way we did. Maybe they'd been out there the whole time, the whole family of them, watching us trap one of their own. But they were coming now, and there was no question in the way they moved. They knew exactly where they were going. Marcus grabbed his rifle, and Tyler grabbed his, and I grabbed mine, and we barred the crooked door as best we could and shoved the table again. Nissed it, and we crouched down below the windows with our hearts going like hammers. The footsteps came closer and closer until we could feel them in the floorboards. And then they stopped, all of them at once, out in the meadow. And there was that low sound again, that chest-deep rumble. Except now, it was coming from many throats, all around us, rising and falling. almost like they were talking to each other, or talking to the one in the snare. And the one in the snare answered them back. Marcus had his rifle up at the window and his hands were shaking, and he was whispering, "If they rush us, we shoot, and we run for the hills, canyon." And Tyler grabbed his arm and said no. He said, "You fire one shot at them and we are all dead, every one of us, do you understand?" He said, "Look at how many there are." He said, "They didn't come here to fight us, they came here for him." And then Tyler did the bravest thing I ever saw a man do, or the most foolish. I still can't decide which. He stood up. He set his rifle down on the floor, and he walked to the door, and he started moving the table away from it. Marcus grabbed for him, and Tyler shook him off. He said, "We made this mess. We're going to fix it." And then he looked at both of us, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, "They're not animals," you saw its eyes. "They're a people, and we put one of their people in a trap." He opened the door and walked out into the meadow with his hands open and empty at his sides. I have never been so afraid in my life as I was watching my brother walk out into that crowd of them. They were everywhere, ringed all around the meadow, dozens of dark, giant shapes standing at the edge of the trees, and Tyler walked right out, into the middle of it with nothing in his hands. He walked over to the one in the snare. He knelt down beside it, and the whole valley held its breath. Tyler took out his knife. I heard Marcus make a sound beside me, but the ones in the trees didn't move. Tyler held the knife up where they could all see it, slow, and then he reached down and he cut the cable. He cut his own brother's trap and set the thing free. And the one in the snare pulled its torn leg in close, and it looked at Tyler from a foot away, those deep brown eyes looking right into his, for a long, long moment. And then it reached out one huge hand and it touched Tyler on the side of his face. Gentle, just for a second, like a blessing or a goodbye. Then it got up, leaning on the tree, and it limped off toward the others, and they closed around it. And they all turned and went back up to the timber the way they'd come, the dark shapes melting back into the trees until the meadow was empty and the light came back and the BRD started up again like nothing had ever happened. Tyler walked back to the cabin and sat down on the step and put his face in his hands and didn't say a word for an hour. We packed up and left within the hour. We didn't take any pictures. We didn't take the snare. We took nothing out of that valley but ourselves and what we'd seen, and we hiked down through the canyon and out to the truck and drove home. In a silence so heavy it sat on us like a stone. And we made a deal, the three of us, before we got back into cell range. We agreed we would never tell anybody, because we knew nobody would believe us, and worse, we knew some people might. People who'd go up there looking. People with cameras and traps and guns looking to do exactly what we'd done, only they wouldn't have a Tyler with them to fix it. So we kept it. For years we kept it. Marcus took it the hardest in the long run. He was the one who'd wanted proof, who'd set the trap, who'd nearly gotten us all killed for the sake of being the man who proved it was real. And he had to live the rest of his life knowing the truth and being the only one besides us two who'd ever know it. It ate at him. He got quiet over the years, our big, confident oldest brother, and he stopped going into the woods at all, which for a man like him was a key, and of death before the real one came. Tyler, I think, made his peace with it more than the rest of us. Maybe because he was the one who'd done the right thing in the end. He used to say, when it was just him and me, that he didn't think we'd been meant to find that valley at all, that we'd wandered into something that wasn't ours, and that the only reason we walked out alive was that we'd given back what we took. He believed that thing had told the others to let us go. He believed it had spoken up for us. I don't know if that's true, but I saw it touch his face, and I saw it could have killed every one of us and chose not to, and I've never had a better explanation. Tyler passed 2 winters ago, heart in his sleep, too young. And at his funeral, standing out at the edge of the cemetery which backs right up against the national forest, I'll tell you what I saw, and you can believe it or not. Up at the tree line, way back in the timber, there was a dark shape standing among the trunks, tall, taller than a man, and it stood there so. The whole time we put my brother in the ground, and when I looked back later, it was gone. Maybe it was a shadow. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe an old man's eyes playing tricks at a funeral. But I like to think it came down out of those mountains to stand at the funeral of the man who'd shown it mercy. I like to think they remember. So that's the story, and that's why I tell it, even though my brothers never would. People want to know if Bigfoot is real, and they ask it like it's a yes or no question, like it's about hair samples and footprints and blur, wry pictures. But that's not the question. I held the question in my hands one cold morning up in a valley nobody can find on a map, and I'll tell you what I learned. They're real, but they're not what we think they are. They're not a beast for us to catch and show off and put in a cage. They're a people, an old people, older than us, who learned a long time ago to stay out of our way and keep to the high, lonesome places where here we don't go. And the only reason you've never seen one is that they don't want you to. They've watched us for who knows how many thousands of years, watched what we do to the things we find, and they made the smart choice. The choice to disappear. And I don't blame them, not after what I saw 3 brothers do with a steel cable and a bag of food and one stupid morning of pride. If you ever go up into the deep country, the real deep country where the roads run out, I want you to remember something. You are not the only thing in those woods that can think. You are not the only thing that watches and remembers and grieves. It's dead. And if you ever feel something out there in the dark, slow and heavy and watching, the smartest thing you can do, the kindest thing, is to leo oyetsuki. Leave your food where it lies, pack up your camp, and walk away. Let them have their mountains. They were there first, and they have very, very long memories. My name is Caleb, and I'm an old man now, and I've told you the truth. Do with it what you want, but if you go up there, go gentle. And if you catch something you don't understand, for God's sake, let it go.